Hey my glam girls, welcome back to my channel. It's Chelsea, where we talk about all things glam and all things girly. And today we have a Natasha Denona ranking video. Now, let me just say, this is gonna be long, okay? So go on ahead, get you a little something to drink, get a little snack, because I have a lot of palettes in front of me and I'm gonna try to not make this long, but if it is long, I already told you it was gonna be long. But I will be ranking my large pan and my midi pan size palettes from Natasha. I am going to exclude the mini sizes because that just would be way too long, and I don't really think you can compare the mini sizes to the midi and larger pan palettes. So we're just gonna be focusing on these. But with any traditional ranking video, I'm gonna be talking about my favorites from least to number one. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I truly do appreciate it. If you are new, I would love for you to consider subscribing and joining the Glam Girl Squad, because we are always here for new members. And let's just get right into this video. So starting with number 13, I've got 13 of them here. And this one is the Natasha Denona Zendo palette. Now, this palette, I think and if I have any reviews of any of these palettes, I will have them linked down below. I'm just gonna provide you like the high points of these and why I'm ranking them as I'm ranking them. So for Zendo, I think this palette is excellent for someone who is really new to eyeshadow and they want an easy formulation that's not going to be overwhelming with any of the shades, but you're going to get an excellent formulation that's going to allow you to be able to appreciate and enjoy eyeshadows, but it's not going to be anything that's going to make you be like, whoa, this is too much, I can never master eyeshadow and I'm done. So what I mean by this is you have beautiful, if I could say, kind of everyday tones in this particular palette, and I don't think any of the shades in this palette are too intimidating. The mattes blend beautifully, they show up well in the eye. The shimmers are okay, and when I say okay, not necessarily in formulation like they're kind of crusty or anything like that. Natasha Denona gives us bang for our buck with the pigmentations of her shimmers, and these shimmers are just, if I could say, normal. So like I said, they are buildable shimmers, they're not overwhelming. A couple of these shimmers like flow, so I was just expecting flow to just give it to me, and it's really more sheer, almost like a shimmer topper. So I was able to build it up a little bit, but it really doesn't give me like a lot of punch when it comes to the impact of the shimmer. Even the shade here called Luster, it looks pretty intense in the pan, but then when you go to apply it to the eye, it's just a beautiful sheen. It's a pretty color, it works well, formulation is beautiful, but it just doesn't give me a lot of pigmentation. So I would say I was a little disappointed with this palette because I really thought it was going to give me a more punch than what it did. But when I pulled myself back and I kind of looked at it again, I was like, this is actually a really great palette for people who are new to eyeshadow, who would be like too intimidated by maybe some of the other formulas that she has, but they still want to really enjoy great quality eyeshadow. And that's what I think Zendo does. So it's ranking last because I just know Natasha and what her shadows do, and that's what I'm looking for. But this, in terms of formulation, is amazing. So I still highly recommend it, but those are my reasons as to why it's coming in last. Okay, number 12 is the Tropic Palette. So this palette, it is so pretty. This is just what I call a beautiful spring palette. Look at all these beautiful pastels, and then you get this last row here that gives you a little bit more pop of color. So I think this palette is beautiful for spring. I actually tend to wear this palette more so in the spring because the shades really just do scream like spring shades with the pastels. You do have a couple of pops of color. I think the formulation is really nice. I don't think this is one of her best formulations, which is part of the reason why it's kind of ranking lower on the ranking scale. But I think the formulation is nice. It's definitely the mattes are definitely blendable, but her newer palette, including Zendo, the mattes are just very smooth, like very buttery. But I really do like this. It's just ranking lower, more so because I'm only using it one time of the year, and pretty much outside of spring, I don't really reach for this one at all. But I love the color story of it. I think it's really unique and fun looking. Like every time I open it up, I smile because I'm like, these are just beautiful colors and they're fun. Okay, coming in at number 11, we have the Trio Chrome palette. So this palette is one of her newer palettes. It came out, I want to say earlier this year or maybe late last year that it came out. And this one is beautiful. The mattes blend so well in this palette. As you can see, we only have 3 shimmers, which is down the middle of this palette, hence Trio Chrome. But then we also have Trio Chrome because these shades all have 3 different shifts to them. And I think this one is beautiful. The formulation, like I said, is stunning. And each of these Trio Chromes are beautiful. The reason why I'm ranking this one closer to the bottom is because this palette, in terms of its shimmer to matte ratio, I am a shimmer girl. I do love, you know, mattes, but I like my shimmers. So for this one, because there's only 3 shimmers, I don't have a lot to choose from when it comes to shimmers. And when I'm looking at the tone of this palette, it's not a lot of variation in tone, and I know y'all are gonna come for me when I come to some other palettes because those other palettes don't have a lot of variation, but I like them more for other reasons. So for this one, I usually only pick this palette up if I want like a purple pastel type of look. And then of course, if I wanna mix it in with one of these particular Trio Chromes. So kind of why I also ranked the Tropic palette kind of lower is the same reason I'm ranking this one kind of lower, because for me, I'm only gonna reach for it for a particular reason, and that's it. But do I recommend it? Absolutely, it's beautiful. And if you're someone who loves shades like this and you wear these shades all the time, you're gonna love this palette. This next one coming in at number 10, this one has like a very special place in my heart. This was the first palette that I truly wanted from Natasha, but at the time I could not fathom spending $129 on the palette. Look how far we've come. I wanted this palette so bad because everybody was talking about it. You probably already know what it is before I even talk about it. I think this is the palette that actually blew Natasha up. I could be so wrong, but I just remember everybody talking about the Sunset palette. Here she is in all her glory. I actually picked this one up on sale for half off. So a lot of these palettes, especially her older ones, she will occasionally put them on sale for as much as to 50% off. So if you're looking at one of these palettes and you do want one, subscribe to her website because she will send you emails of when she's having sales. That's actually when I picked up some of these. And you can get them for, you know, a cheaper price. But let's get back to the Sunset. At the time, and I can't even say at the time, I am a warm toned girl at heart. And especially when this palette came out, I literally only wore like browns and golds. That's all I would wear. I had not ventured into color. So when I saw this palette, I said, this palette is me. It's everything that I want. I love this leather packaging. This is still like my favorite packaging that she has. I know now she's moved to this packaging, this more plastic packaging, but I just felt like this leather packaging was so luxe and so different. So I actually do still like it. I wouldn't be mad if she like went back to it. However, I do not like this sleeve right here. She could take this out and then we'd be good and just write the names on the packaging. Anywho, I just love everything about this palette. I love the shades in this palette. The shimmers are beautiful. The mattes blend okay. And I will have to say, as much as I don't want to say, this palette is not one of her best formulated palettes. When I used this palette for the first time, I was like, I'm glad I waited and I paid 50% off for this, because I don't think this palette is worth $129 because it's not her best formulation. However, if you like warm tones and you love these shades, you will get a ton of use out of it. And when I say it's not her best formulation, it's not that you're gonna have to, you know, like work way too hard to get the look that you want, but you know, you're gonna have to put in maybe a little bit of elbow grease when you're working, you know, with the reds and this brown here. They eventually do blend. I still reach for this palette, so it's not one that I don't use. It's just not, you know, one of her best formulations. So I would say if you want this one, wait till it goes on sale for sure. Onto a palette that I did not think I was gonna love as much as I did. And this is the Glam palette. So this is, I would say, probably one of her truest, coolest palettes. And this palette, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm gonna get it, but I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but hey, I have to buy it. Oh my gosh. The formulation of this Cool Tune palette, number one, I think is probably one of her better formulated products out there, like better formulated products. These shades blend beautifully and I love the shimmers. I also love about this palette is that it is cool toned, but it's not too cool. We've got some really good neutral tones in this palette. So for instance, when I look at these two rows right here, I see way more neutral tones, almost on the verge of being warm right along here. And then we get to the middle and we work way over here and we get more traditional cooler tones in this palette. So if you're someone who's like, I want a really solid cool tone palette, but I don't want a lot because I don't really wear them, but I just want a solid one so that when I want a cool tone look, I have one. I so recommend this palette. It is ranking a little lower because I don't reach for cool tones all the time, but in terms of formulation, I think it is one of her best formulated palettes, hands down. Now into a palette that was my jam, summer of 2019. Ooh, Sunrise was it for me. Coming in at number 8, Sunrise was it. I went back and actually looked at my video on the Sunrise palette, and I actually titled the video like, is this me in a palette? I think I titled it something like that. And oh my gosh, like this is still me sort of in a palette, because y'all know I love me some pinks. So we've got nice pinks here. I also love purples and browns and oranges. I think this one is perfect for the summer. So this is a palette that I like to wear in the summer, and I kind of don't reach for it outside of the summer, which it's ranking where it's ranking at. But the formulation is beautiful. The mattes blend well. Like I could not say anything negative about this palette in terms of what I like in a palette for the summer. So this is like one of my go-to palettes in the summer. Sunrise, I think formulation-wise is much better than Sunset. If I had to choose between Sunrise and Sunset, oh, I'd probably have to choose Sunrise. Ooh, but Sunset just gives me all the nostalgic feels. Oh, okay. All right, coming in at number 7 is one of her newer palettes, Circo Loco. And first of all, is this not her most fun palette? Like, I think this palette has got to be one of her most fun, one of her most unique and different palettes that she's ever created. And the formulation is like chef's kiss. Beautiful. I remember when I received this palette, I was just like, it's even prettier in person. And the first look that I made with this palette, I used just the matte, and I got so many compliments from you all. I used cotton candy in the crease, Joker all over the lid, and then I went back in with cotton candy over Joker just to fully like blend it out. That was it. And I got so many compliments on that eye look, and I'm like, I only used 2 mattes, but this formulation is beautiful. Like, this is the formulation that I want her to continue to make because it is solid and it is good. I do like her creamy matte formula, but I know with her creamy matte formula, it can be hit or miss. Her traditional matte shades blend like butter. We get hardcore pigmentation from these shimmers, and you cannot ask for anything better, especially when you're asking for a bright and colorful palette like this. It's only coming in at number 7 because this is not a palette I would reach for all the time in terms of like shades that I want to wear, you know, on a day-to-day basis. But do I reach for this? Yes. And do I love it? Yes. And do I recommend it? Absolutely. Yes. Coming in at number 6, this palette was my jam last year, summer of 2020. And I know some people were like, what's the deal? But ooh, the bronze palette just spoke to my makeup loving soul. So like I told y'all before, I love golds and browns and all of those things. And in the summer, I like to be a bronzed goddess. And so this eyeshadow palette made my eyes a bronzed goddess. And that's why I loved it. No, that it does not provide the most diversity. It doesn't, especially if you are looking to, like, you know, diversify your lid color. A lot of these lid shimmer shades are pretty similar and wouldn't look too different on the eye. However, I just felt like the formulation, and I do feel like the formulation is amazing. And I also felt like this was the first eyeshadow palette from her with the creamy matte formula, where the creamy matte formula was actually good. Like, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to put like both of my elbows into the blending of this eyeshadow. It blends out perfectly and it's beautiful, and we get rich pigmentation. Like, this is truly a creamy matte. Oh, I could not say enough about this palette. I think it is so stunning and so beautiful. And this is another palette that I will typically reach for in the summer, but I actually will also use this in the fall because of the golds and the browns and the reds. It looks more like, you know, it could work for summer and fall. So that's why it's ranking a little higher on this scale, because I do reach for this more often than just like one time out of the year or like one season out of the year. But this one is still one of my favorites. I think it's just beautiful. And if you like bronze tones, you would really enjoy this one. Top 5. So coming in at number 5, we have the Metropolis palette. This one is actually newer to my collection. I purchased this one this year, but once I got it, I was like, I should have been bought this palette because I think it's beautiful. I want to say that when this palette came out and I was looking at reviews, people were like 50-50 on this. Like, some people loved it, some people didn't like it. Some people felt like the creamy matte formulation in this palette wasn't the best, and maybe that's why it took me a while to buy it. But from my experience, I really do like this one. I don't think the creamy matte formula is the best in this one. I think the best creamy matte formulation that I have tried has been in the bronze palette. That's just me. But I think this one is a good creamy matte formulation compared to all of her other creamy matte formulations that she has put out there. So I think this one is beautiful. This is like a fall go-to palette for me, but you can also use it in the summertime. So this one is ranking higher in this scale because I think you can get more diverse looks from this palette, and I really do enjoy the tones in this palette. We also do get some of her traditional matte shades along with her shimmer shades, and all of these shades just give you high impact and color, and I really, really do enjoy it. Plus, I like the packaging of this. Like, we're getting a nice shiny faux leather type of packaging, so I really like this too. My newest palette to my collection that I just picked up, I want to say I bought this palette within this month. Finally! I have wanted this palette for probably the longest, second to Sunset. The Lila palette. Lila comes in at number 4. Is she not gorgeous? Okay, so when Sunset came out, everybody loved Sunset and it was like all the rage. Then Lila came out and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks so pretty. But once again, I was stunted by the price tag. But I was just like, when Lila came out, like, I was delving into some color and I was like, I think I could like this. But I remember everybody saying like, oh, this is so cool toned. This is so cool toned. And at the time, I didn't do cool toned. So for a long time, I didn't purchase Lila because I'm like, it's cool tone, I don't do cool tones. Then when I did cool tones, I was just like, Lila, Lila, Lila. And finally, I picked this one up. I got it on sale, and I have truly been enjoying this palette. I've worn this palette a few good times in this month that I've purchased it, and I think the mattes blend well. The shimmers that I've used so far are really pretty. I would say that this palette formulation-wise is better than Sunset, but still kind of on par. So we're not getting the most impact when it comes to these shimmers, but it's still really nice and it's really beautiful, and I really do enjoy it. I love the color scheme of this palette, and in my opinion, this is not extremely cool toned. It is cooler, but it's not like cool toned like how everybody kept raving about it years ago. I love this. I think it's so beautiful, and that's why it's ranking higher on this scale for me. Plus, biasedly, I have been using it a lot lately, so like I've been reaching for it a lot. And I think too, I'm just so happy to have it now, and it actually lived up to the expectations that I wanted it to live up to. So I really, really enjoy this one. Like I said, I love this leather packaging, love that it's purple. So Lila is like, finally, I got it. Like Sunset, I would recommend getting Lila on sale. I don't think that's one that you just must purchase even at the full price. But I think if it's one that you want and you're like, is it worth the money? Get it on sale, and yes, it is worth the money. Number 3, you could not have told me last year when I got this palette that this palette was going to be literally number 3 out of all of my palettes. I would have been like, you're crazy, because the formulation is not good. It's one of the, if I could say, worser creamy matte formulations, but I kept reaching for it over and over and over again, because when you see it, you're gonna be like, here Chelsea goes. Y'all know I love me some pinks, okay? This Love palette, first of all, when I saw the promo pictures for it, I was like, and I must have it. It is me in a palette. All of these pinks, and then we have some purples. Oh, they're so pretty. And then when I tried it, the creamy mattes in this palette they really make me work. They really make me work. They're like, we love you and you love us, but what you're not gonna do is walk out of here doing a quick little blend. However, I have learned how to work with the creamy mattes in this palette, and what I have learned is you start out with a little, blend that, and then add some more on top and blend that. So what you don't wanna do is pack your brush with a whole bunch of the creamy matte formula and then try to blend from all of that. That's when you're gonna be blending for like 10 minutes and you're still gonna have, you know, some patchiness, and it's gonna be frustrating. Start out with a little and build up to the intensity that you want, and then you will be happy. So it was a little bit of a learning curve with this palette, but once I figured out the learning curve, when I tell you, I could not put it down. It was in my 2020 Best of Eyeshadow Palettes video. It is still one of my favorite palettes. I still reach for this one. Every time I look at it, I'm like, ugh. This is one of the prettiest palettes I own. Oh, everything from the outer packaging being pink, then we're lined in the red here. Like, this one is so pretty. The shimmers though are impeccable. There is no learning curve with them. They go on beautifully. You get high shine pigmentation. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the shimmers. It was just the mattes that were just a little tricky. But that palette right there. Now, number 2 is, oh, this is actually my newest palette, Biba, y'all. Okay, so let me tell y'all a little bit of story. I actually got Biba a few years ago for, I wanna say Christmas. I asked for it. I couldn't appreciate it then. I was like, okay, this is just, you know, a neutral palette. And at the time, these were the colors that I was wearing. Like, they were the only colors that I really wore. And so I just kind of was like, where's the hype? I don't really get it. So I actually took it back. I think I used it one time and I just let it sit for like weeks. And I said, you know what? There's no need of me wasting this money. I'm gonna take it back. So recently, I was like, I wanna rank Natasha palettes. Like, let me give Biba another chance. When I tell y'all I can't put this down, like, cannot put this down. This neutral palette is exactly what it is. It is a neutral palette. It is not anything that is like innovative in terms of like, oh my gosh, I've never seen these shades before. Like, we all have these shades pretty much in at least one of our neutral palettes that we have. But the formulation, chef's kiss, the shimmers, beautiful. We get, you know, different formulations of the shimmers, and these mattes, they just blend like a dream. Like, when I was organizing and ranking these, at one point I was like, is this my number 1? Is it? Is it my number 1? And I had to sit and think for a while. And then I, you know, was like, no, the number 1 palette, like, it is still my number 1. But when I say this is so close, like, if my number 1 is 1, Biba is like 1.5. So Biba is not number 2. Biba is like 1.5. This palette is so stinking good. It is your everyday palette. This is your work palette. This is your going out palette. This is your, I kind of want to jazz it up palette. Like, you really can use this palette for a plethora of looks. You can smoke it out with this palette. You can be very simple with this palette. You can be a little angelic with this palette. Like, you really can get pretty much any type of like neutral look with this palette. And you can go very intense with it because you've got this black shade here, or you can keep it nice and light. I cannot get enough of this palette. So down to my number one palette. It is the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes. And this is actually the first Natasha Denona palette that I purchased. Oh, am I gonna cry? Oh, I'm not gonna cry. But I get even more feels about this palette than I do Sunset. I remember it was a dark and stormy night. Okay, it wasn't a dark and stormy night, but it was at night. It was after 3 something in the morning. I think I had woken up because my second daughter, Emma, yes, I think Emma was a little one. I had just gotten up with her. Yes, it's a story time, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I was perusing the tube of you, and I watched a review of the gold palette. Y'all, the Natasha Denona gold palette is my number one palette. And when I saw the promos of this palette, I was like, absolutely not. That will not be my first Natasha palette. Like, if I'm gonna purchase a palette, it's gonna be Sunset. Because that's, you know, like I told you, I wanted it, but I couldn't fathom purchasing it because of the price. And by the time gold came out, I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, I can do this. If I save my money, I can do this. So I remember watching Seeking Alexandria. I was watching her review, and when she finished her eye look, before I knew it, I had gone to Beautylish, added to cart, and checked out. And I was like, I did it. I did it. Okay, first of all, excuse the palette. When I open this up, you're going to see why it's my number one. Not, look how bad I beat this palette up. I have dropped this palette, hence why this shade right here just looks just terrible. It has fallen out. I've put it back in. This is my most used Natasha palette. I mean, you all can see it from the other palettes that you've seen. I can't even explain in words why I love this one so much, but I do have some words, so let me go ahead and tell them to you. Number one, I think this is by far, it's just me, I think this is by far her best formulated eyeshadow palette, okay? It's just me, okay? If you don't agree, it's okay. I think this is her best formulated one. The mattes, I can't talk enough about the mattes, the different formulations of shimmer. And yes, we do have like 50 shades of gold here in this palette, but somehow we can get some different looks with this palette, especially with her throwing in these like turquoise types of shade, well, more so like turquoise type of shade, and then this is like this blue-green shade here. It is just stunning. This white shade is not white, it looks white, but it's got like a gold hue to it. I love this mustard color in here. Like, I just cannot say any more about it. It is just like, every time I think about like which is my favorite Natasha palette, this one comes to mind. It is the one that I use the longest, like in terms of, you know how you are in love with the palette and you just use that palette for the longest amount of time. This is the palette that I have used for like the longest stretch of time. And even though I haven't used it recently, I now don't use it as much because of this shade that is broken. Every time I open the palette, I'm just like, I don't want anything to happen to it. I know I can buy another one, but I also want to keep the first one that I bought because it's the first one that I bought. But this palette is just stunning. It is really, truly stunning, and I just can't say enough about it. I really can't. So yes, that is my ranking for me. Did you think that the gold palette would be my number one palette? So leave me in the comment section below what your favorite Natasha Denona palette is. If you want me to rank my mini Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes, I can do that for you all as well. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. And if you've made it to this point in the video and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, come on and subscribe. I would love to have you. And guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in my very next video. Bye, guys.